Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name's Alyssa, and on behalf of Staples, thank you for joining us for today's session on strategies to combat work from home burnout. It's a topic I know many of us are dealing with these days, myself included, so that's why we're extremely excited to be able to bring you an expert on this subject today. Dr. Nicole Lipkin is an internationally recognized organizational psychologist, executive coach, keynote speaker, and the author of 2 popular business books. She's also the CEO of Equilibria Leadership Consulting, which is a leadership development firm that combines the science of human behavior with practical approaches to business and leadership. So I know we're going to be in for some really fascinating and helpful information today. We will have time for Q&A at the end, so you can just scan the QR code on the screen, or you can follow the link on the Eventbrite page for this event. You can submit questions at any point during the session, so keep them coming. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Nicole Lipkin. Nicole, thank you so much for being here. Take it away.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure to speak with all of you about this. And I know none of us are alone in this feeling of burnout as we're dealing with all of this stuff hitting us at once. And you know, I like to share some statistics before I start talking about this topic, because it does feel good to know that we're not alone and that this feeling is actually quite normal now. So people are definitely impacted. In fact, a survey that was done in April, and obviously many more months have passed since April, and the numbers are only probably a little bit higher. 75% of people are feeling very more socially isolated. 57% of people are feeling greater anxiety. 67% of people are feeling higher levels of stress. 53% are feeling more exhausted. And more than half of Americans, or nearly half of Americans, report that this crisis is really harming their mental health. And I would say at this point, that number is probably higher. So we're seeing these rising mental health rates across the globe too. So we know that people are impacted, and we understand that that this is having a huge impact on our work, our personal and professional lives. In fact, burnout in general is I think the number's like $300 and something billion problem, because burnout affects our productivity. It affects our ability to show up for work. It affects our ability to show up for our families. And according to another survey that was done, about 58% of employee surveys reported burnout in April. Again, I would assume these numbers are much higher at this point. Studies are being done. 47% complained about their workload causing the burnout. 39% said that it was balancing work and life. And I am assuming that number is significantly higher at this point, again, with parents who are working from home and dealing with supervising their children going to school at home. 37% say it's a lack of good communication, feedback, and support at work. 30% say it's time pressure and a lack of clarity around expectations. And 28% say that it's performance expectations. So we're not alone in this. Burnout is real. And when we think about what burnout is caused by chronic workplace stress. That's what it's defined as. And the American Psychiatric Association estimates that about 61% of people are chronically stressed at work. So burnout numbers are pretty high. And the telltale symptoms of burnout, when you look at like how to diagnose burnout, are low energy and exhaustion, disengagement or cynical feelings about the job, and reduced workplace efficacy. I'm sure a lot of us, me too, are feeling these kind of crushing symptoms of burnout. And for all of us, even though these are the symptoms that they talk about, it shows up differently. Burnout shows up, exhaustion shows up differently, disengagement shows up differently for each person, and efficacy shows up differently for each person. So when we think about burnout, you know, and we think about stress, given that that's what causes burnout, as human beings, our brains and our bodies are designed to be awesome at handling very short bouts of short-term stress. We are great at handling short-term stress. That's our adrenaline system, our nervous system. We are designed hormonally, with our nervous system, with our brain, the way everything is designed, we are absolutely designed to handle these short bouts of stress. That's how humans survive. That's how we evolved, and that's how we survive. But we cave when we deal with long-term stress. And what we're dealing with right now is long-term stress. And when we look at the impact of the brain, the overall impact of the brain and what we're going through, it makes sense that the majority of us are experiencing workplace burnout, but also home life burnout. So let's look at all the different things that are causing burnout and that are causing us to feel exhausted, stressed out, maybe not so happy, maybe on edge, maybe irritable, all the different things that we might be feeling. So first of all, stress, burnout, it affects our mental exhaustion. So, we're dealing with ongoing COVID situation, and we don't know what the future of COVID will hold. We don't know what the future is going to look like. This is an ambiguous situation. And what we do know about human beings is that when our brains are faced with ambiguous situations, we don't tolerate that well. And even if you think you tolerate well, our body doesn't tolerate it well. And the reason why is, as humans, we love the status quo. We love knowing what's expected of us. We love knowing what the plan is. So when we're with this ambiguous situation and with this constant change going around, it immediately sets our brains on fire. And it immediately adds to that kind of feeling of exhaustion and brain fog. The other thing with this pandemic and with the school situation, work situation, and not necessarily a political situation, all of this stuff rising up, it feels like there's a loss of control. And as most of us can attest to, feeling like we're in control, even though we're out of control with most things, but having that sense of feeling like we're in control actually has a profound effect on our mental wellness. But at this point in life, there's a lot we're not in control of, and feeling powerless can enhance that feeling of mental exhaustion and enhance that feeling of burnout. The other thing that's worth mentioning is grief. Whether or not you've lost someone from COVID, we all are going through a collective experience of grief because of loss of the way of life that we knew it. And also loss of knowing what the future is going to look like, even though none of us knew what the future is going to look like. Most of us had a plan or had a sense or an idea of what it was going to look like, or at least believed or perceived that we did. But this profound grief that we are collectively experiencing over the change of how things is contributing to this mental exhaustion that we're feeling. So this is creating just basic unhappy brains, which is contributing to burnout and contributing to the mental exhaustion, contributing to stress and other mental health issues. So with that in mind, the other things that are kind of compounding that are worth saying is, again, unemployment and other financial strains, ongoing stress related to uncertainty, continued social isolation, and then the peaks and valleys with COVID-19 and the political situation and the future. All of these things are exacerbating the symptoms that we're feeling. So I'm saying all of this not to kind of make us more depressed and feel down, but I'm saying all of this to normalize any feelings that you might be experiencing, any feelings of stress or burnout or exhaustion that you might be feeling, because at this point, we've all been talking about it so much that sometimes it might feel a little like, oh, why can't I just kind of get over this? Or why can't I just kind of pump myself up or get beyond this? It kind of feels sometimes like, oh, shouldn't be talking about this anymore. But as time goes on, it actually gets more difficult for our brains and our bodies to manage. The great thing is that emotional wellness and burnout management, we know it's a non-negotiable priority. We must take care of it. But the great thing is that when we look at emotional wellness and we look at burnout management, it's not about trying to get rid of it. We're going to feel that way. It's not about trying to get rid of stress. Stress is a normal thing. It occurs. There's good stress. There's bad stress. It's going to happen. It's more about building emotional and mental resilience to cope with the stress. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So just knowing that you can have some tools in your belt to manage this can really help. So to up the resilience game, you need to focus on emotion management and stress management, mindset, and boundaries. And that's what we're going to be breaking into today and talking a little bit about. And hopefully I'll be sending you home with a few tools under your belt to start upping the resilience game. So on that note, let's start with talking about stress. So when we think about stress, I like to think about like the brain as a shelf, equivalent to the shelf you go and get at IKEA. So you go into IKEA, you smell the yummy cinnamon buns, You walk through, and if you make it out of that place, you walk out with your shelf. You get home and you get ready to put your shelf up. And there's always those little directions with that little guy that tells you how many pounds you can put on your shelf. So you put the shelf up, and if you manage to do that, that's a feat in itself. Congratulations. You get your shelf up. And it says on the directions, don't put more than 50 pounds on this shelf. Okay, great. Throughout the directions, you start putting your books and tchotchkes on that shelf. You're at 30 pounds, a couple more books, a couple more tchotchkes. You're at 40 pounds. You're at 50 pounds, a couple more books. You're at 60 pounds. And then all of a sudden, you start to see that shelf sag just a little bit. It's fine. You go to 70 pounds. You go a couple more books, 80 pounds. And then all of a sudden, your shelf snaps and it breaks. You're like, oh, this is such a cheap shelf. Why did I buy stuff from IKEA? The thing is the directions warned us that we shouldn't put more than 50 pounds on that shelf, but we kept on pushing and pushing and pushing. Same thing with our brains. We have all the signs and symptoms of sagging shelves, but as adults, we have this perception that we just have to keep going. You know, we're responsible. We have to keep going and going and going. And we're all familiar with the signs and symptoms of the sagging shelf. Some examples of that would be going to the supermarket and completely forgetting why you're there once you arrive and not knowing what you have to buy. Reading an email or reading a book and reading that same paragraph over and over and over again and nothing sinking in. Or waking up chronically agitated and hating everyone around you. So the thing is, as humans, we're not supposed to be chronically agitated. Being agitated occasionally, okay, but not chronically agitated. We're supposed to be able to get through a paragraph and move on to the next. We're supposed to be able to carry a chunk of information in our mind and remember that, and then move on to the next. These are just some of the signs and symptoms that our shelf is sagging. And the thing is that when we ignore that sagging shelf, and those are two very hard words to say together. When we ignore that sagging shelf and it snaps, the consequences can be pretty profound, especially with how we impact those around us or how others impact us. So one of the ways that the consequences can be profound is through emotional contagion. And I don't know if any of you on this call today have ever heard of emotional contagion, but you've definitely experienced it. So emotional contagion has to do with if you've ever had a really depressed friend. You usually feel pretty bummed out and depressed around that friend. And if you've ever had a really upbeat friend, not the annoying, really chronically upbeat friend, but like an upbeat friend, you feel good around that person. The reason why is because we mimic one another. That's why when you walk down the street and someone's smiling at you in a non-creepy way, you can't help but smile back. So when we're born, mommy smiles down at us and we smile back, and mommy frowns at us, we frown back. So those muscles, when you're making a smile, they trigger a physiological response in your body that triggers an extremely powerful part in your brain called your limbic center, which is your emotional center. And that produces the feeling of happiness. You frown, muscles in your body trigger a physiological response, trigger that limbic system, and you feel sad. So emotions aren't really sexy. They're just neurochemical firings that make you feel certain ways. The thing is that if I'm feeling down or if I'm not managing my shelf and I'm chronically agitated, I'm starting to affect everyone around me. And I'm sure most of us who have worked in organizations and companies on teams have experienced that before. If you have a really negative person on a team, that person carries a ton of power and really can impact those people around. So emotional contagion spreads like wildfire. Our moods impact other people. They spread like wildfire. So it's really important that we manage our shelf right now, because everyone around us is feeling that burnout. Everyone around us is feeling that weight. So our emotional footprint has a really, really big imprint on the people around us, just like the emotional footprint of other people around us have a big imprint on us. So one of the things that's super important is to always remember, as Dr. Freud would say, before you diagnose yourself with depression, anxiety, or low self-esteem, first make sure you are not in fact surrounded by, I won't say the word, but that is a really, really important concept. Make sure that you're surrounding yourself with people that aren't bringing you down. And if you're the one that's struggling with your shelf and you're feeling really down, make sure you're mindful of that, because your impact on other people is probably a little bit more powerful than you think. On that note, I want to bring up I want to talk a little bit about the impact of technology on our shelves, because right now, most of us are working from home and most of us are spending hours and hours and hours looking at a screen like we've never done before. And, I think we take for granted when we were going to work and going to places or traveling or whatever it might be, like all those little moments that we were away from our computer, whether it be going to get a glass of water, whether it be going out for a little break, the commute to work, the commute back from work, all of these little moments that we had that weren't face to face with our computers actually helped our sanity, helped our eyesight, and helped our fatigue. So technology in your shelf is something really important. That's why a lot of us are talking about Zoom fatigue. It is real. We're not designed to sit and stare at a computer screen for hours and hours and hours a day without these little breaks. So, all the things we did take for granted actually meant something. So one of the things I'm going to talk about when I talk about how to manage this, but it's, and actually if you can go back one slide, but one of the things I'm going to talk about and how to manage this, it's so important, is making sure, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but making sure that you're working in those little teeny breaks that you used to take, that you weren't even mindful that you used to take. So, so important. But the other thing to keep in mind with technology, and I'm sure many of you know about this already, but it's worth repeating over and over and over because we should be a little bit angry about this. Our technology has a power over us that, and we've allowed that to happen, that it is not great. That makes us want to keep checking. So what happens is that when your phone beeps or buzzes or whatever it might be, if I'm in a deep conversation and that phone goes off, beeps and buzzes, I can't help but to look, because the way my brain is wired to look at novel things. My brain is wired to look at something new. So if I've been talking to you, that phone going off is something new. So that's going to be more attractive to my brain. And when that buzz or beep goes off, it sends an incredibly powerful signal to a very important part of your brain. I talked about the limbic system, but there's also the reward system in your brain. That powerful signal that's being sent to your brain every time your phone buzzes or beeps, it's basically saying, yay, you have a friend, someone likes you. That signal is more powerful than any of the things that you try to put, boundaries that you try to put in place with technology, because that signal starts setting off the dopamine loop, and the dopamine loop, that triggers our feel-good neurochemicals in our brain. And that is what we're always trying to chase, that feeling. And that's why when you post something on Facebook, it's really hard not to immediately keep on checking and checking and checking to see if someone liked it. That's why pressing the inbox button, it's hard not to stop that, or just to be drawn to your technology, even though you don't want to be drawn or controlled by your technology. So the boundaries that we have to set with our technology, we'll talk a little bit about that shortly, are super, super important, because that absolutely makes your shelf sag way quicker, way quicker. Now we can go on to that next slide. So when we're talking about managing your stress, the other important thing to talk about is managing your will. And the best way, and I'm talking about willpower and the choices you're making, and just managing your energy throughout the day. And the best way I can describe this, I want to talk about a research study that was done that's super interesting. It's the best way I can describe it. So there was a study that was done, and there were 3 research groups. There was the chocolate chip cookie eating research group, there was the radish eating group, and then there was the control group. And there was a big research room. And in the room, there was a table, and on the table was certain foods. But when you would walk into the room, it smelled like freshly baked cookies, chocolate chip cookies. So the chocolate chip cookie eating group was sent in. On the table was a plate of beautiful freshly baked chocolate chip cookies. The room smelled delicious, and there were some chocolates, all of that. And the chocolate chip cookie eating group was asked to sit down, and they were told, hey, please feel free to eat a couple of cookies, enjoy yourself. And then when they were done, they were sent into a room to go solve an unsolvable problem. Then the radish eating group was sent in to that research room. And on the table was this big bowl of beautiful red radishes. And they were told to come in, please enjoy a couple of red radishes, enjoy yourself. And then they were sent into the room to go solve. And I'm sorry, also on the table were the chocolate chip cookies. Sorry about that. They were told, eat the radishes, enjoy yourself, but please, please don't touch the chocolate chip cookies. And then they were sent into the research room to go solve an unsolvable problem. And then the control group was chopped liver. They were just sent into the room to solve an unsolvable problem. What's very interesting about this study is that you would think the chocolate chip cookie eating group would have given up trying to solve that unsolvable problem first. And the reason why, because of the sugar rush and then that sugar crash, right? But it was actually the radish eating group that gave up first and quit first. The reason why was because most of us would prefer, especially in a room that smells so delicious, most of us would prefer to eat freshly baked chocolate chip cookies over a radish. But this group was told, hey, you can't have any chocolate chip cookies. Please just eat the radishes. They had to make a couple of choices. Number one, they had to make the choice of whether or not they were going to follow the directions. Number two, if they were choosing to follow the directions, they had to manage their own willpower and not eat the chocolate chip cookies and then eat the radishes. Then when they were set into the room, they had already depleted some of their mental energy because they had to control themselves from eating the chocolate chip cookies. So they gave up first. So let's apply that to our day in and day out lives, because this is super interesting. So think about all the things that you do during a day to have to make that require you to make choices, that require you to make decisions, that require you to control yourself and manage your emotions, right? So it starts when we wake up. We have to make the choice of whether or not we're going to hit snooze and how many times we're going to hit snooze. We have to make the choice about whether we're going to shower that morning or not. And hopefully you pick the right choice. We have to make the choice about what we're going to wear, what we're going to eat for breakfast, what we're going to eat for lunch, what meetings we're going to, what the kids are going to eat, how participative we're going to be in their school day, all of these choices. By the time we get to the evening, that's why most of us, when our spouses or partners or friends ask, hey, what do you want to eat? That's why most of us snap. You make the decision. I don't care. I don't want to be part of this anymore. We are so depleted by the end of the day that it's hard for us to actually make more choices and more decisions. Couple that with everything that's been going on and all the really, really, really difficult choices many of us have had to make about children, about work, about our own lives. Our wells are just completely overflowing at this point. So when you think about that, you have to really be mindful of what you're forcing yourself to make choices about and what decisions you're forcing yourself to think about. And that's why when you look at some of the most successful leaders in our lives, like if you look at Steve Jobs for a second, that's why he wore the same outfit every single day, because he said, I don't want to waste any mental energy picking out an outfit every day. Like I'm going to routinize what I wear because I have too many other important things to focus on. That's why routinizing and trying to routinize as much as you can in life is so important. And this is a little bit harder for women to do in general when we are showing up for work. Like now it's a little bit easier. We just have to pick a top, but hey, leggings are fantastic and gym clothes are fantastic on the bottom. But, you know, if we look around, like men have it a little bit easier this way because it seems like they're always wearing, you know, kind of the same thing. But for women, if we can think about it the same way, like why do we want to deplete our mental energy picking out our outfits? Instead, pick a uniform, pick a style that looks great and get it in a ton of colors. And if you really want to do different things, waste the mental energy at night when your well is already sapped to pick out your outfit for the next day. But let's look at some strategy that we can do to manage your well and also manage your stress. So number one is routinize. Things you can routinize: what you're wearing. You can routinize what you eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I know that sounds boring, but pick a couple meals you eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner and do that and save the special ones for the weekend. You can routinize what time you wake up. Don't play with that. And you can routinize what time you go to bed. Some of us can routinize what time we work out. Some of us may even have the luxury of being able to routinize when we check our emails or which days we have certain meetings. I know that's not a luxury that everyone can do, but if you can, do it. Routinize as much as you can, because routinized behaviors don't sap your energy. They do not sap your mental energy. And like we're learning, that mental energy is what kind of puts us into that rut. Second, control all the way. When I was talking about our phones, even though it's hard, even though that we've allowed our technology to take control of us, we are able to fight back by setting important boundaries. So number one, turn off your notifications. Have a conversation with people on your team if you're able to. Again, I know this is not everyone can do this. With people on your team and your family, that if it's an emergency, don't text or email, call. So you know if someone's actually calling you on the phone, it's an emergency and something you need to respond to. So, I really highly recommend making agreements with teams and figuring that out. But turn your notifications off, turn Messenger off. When things pop up on your computer screen or your phone, your brain's needs are more powerful than your ability to control it. So you need to set these boundaries in place. Another thing that's really important is get it out of your brain and either write it down or talk to people. If you've ever noticed when you have a lot of things to do or you're feeling stressed out, it starts becoming bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And it almost becomes like a catastrophe and it becomes very overwhelming in your brain. The reason why is when we keep things in our heads, especially our to-do lists in our heads, it's running through our limbic system. It's running through all those processes in our brain. Our brains are very emotional. But when we talk it out loud, especially when we talk it to someone else who can look at our schedule a little bit more objectively, it helps us put things in perspective. Or when you write it out about what's an absolute must right now versus what can be put off, it starts helping us look at problems in a more logical manner. Keeping it in your brain, it's going to explode. Use aids, things like an Apple Watch, put the buzzer on, like to get up and to stand every 15, 20 minutes. Same thing with your eyes. Looking at Zoom all day or Google Meet or whatever it is affecting your eyesight. And unfortunately, as my eye doctor told me, that's a muscle you can't build back. So make sure you're looking away every 15 or 20 minutes. Schedule self-care. Again, for most of us, we're terrible at this. We're great at taking care of everyone else, but terrible at taking care of ourselves. But remember that sagging shelf. When we let it snap, and for a lot of us that has snapped already, the impact, the consequences are much, much greater. And on a side note, to push that home more, as humans, we hold on to negative events way more than positive events. And it's easier for us to retrieve negative information than it is positive information. That's why if you've ever had a really bad boss before, you really hold on to all the things, all the ways they messed up, but it's hard for you to remember any things they did well. So same with ourselves. It's taking care of ourselves, paying attention to ourselves. It's very hard to do. So you have to schedule it in. And that's why experts recommend scheduling it in. Stay hydrated, good nutrition, exercise, keeping these routines are super important. They're just as important as taking care of everyone else. And then meditation and mindfulness, very hard practices. I admittedly have been trying this for years and really struggle with it, but there's a reason why people do it. There's a lot of science behind it that it really does work over the long term, that these are these little small steps that make a huge difference in life. So I want to talk a little bit now about mindset, because that's the second thing that we can tackle to help ourselves fight this burnout or this overwhelm or feelings of stress. So mindset, the idea of fixed and growth mindset is pulled from Carol Dweck's book, Mindset. And I absolutely suggest you read it if you can, especially for those of you that have children. It's a really wonderful book to help with raising kids. It's fantastic. But if you don't know this concept, I'll briefly describe it. The difference between a fixed and growth mindset is really simple. When you have a fixed mindset about something, you believe that you're as far as you're going to get with that skill or that character trait or whatever it is. Like I am who I am, or this is as far as I'll go with math, whatever it might be. And because of that belief, you're not going to put yourself out in situations to try to push yourself more. You're going to avoid challenges. You're going to stick with what you know. You're not going to try harder. Versus a growth mindset, if you believe that you can continue to evolve until the day you die, and you believe you can continue to grow with certain skills, you're going to always try to grow. You're going to put yourself in situations where you might fail. You're going to take the risks and do what you have to do. And the truth is, what we know about humans, and this is great news, is, hey, we can evolve till the day we die. The thing is that you have to make the choice to evolve until the day you die. Our bodies are going to evolve, but your skills will evolve if you choose to evolve them. So we have so much power over our ability to grow or not grow. And that's a really important concept to think about, because that also means that we have a lot of power in how we conceptualize our burnout and how we think about our overwhelm and our relationship with stress. If we have a growth mindset about it, that means that we feel we don't have to stay in that feeling. That means that we have the belief we can move past it and move beyond it. If we have a fixed mindset about it, well, then we're going to stay stuck in it. That's what I find so fascinating, that just a simple belief that you have about your behavior or your thought process or whatever it is can literally, like that, shift your relationship with that skill. And I'm going to give you an example. When I got married, we went on a honeymoon, and one of the places we went was the south of France. And we rented this Airbnb with this wonderful couple. And I'm terrible at speaking Spanish. I'm terrible at languages. And I really believe that. I have a fixed mindset about speaking other languages. And so we rented this house, and the gentleman spoke French, Spanish, and English. And I didn't know he spoke Spanish, but my husband and him were conversing a little bit in French because he speaks a little French. My husband speaks a little French. And I walked up to him and I said, "Oh, if you spoke Spanish, then we could talk." And he said, "Tú hablas español." And literally, I had an opportunity to practice my Spanish. But what I did instead, because of my fixed belief that I can't speak Spanish, was I turned around and ran away. Like I literally, like a kid, just turned around and ran away. And that was embarrassing. Like it was weird. It was weird behavior. And I have been in Spanish speaking countries. I have Spanish speaking friends, but I've never taken the opportunity to put myself out there to fail and mess up and try. But because I believe that I can't speak Spanish, I don't even try, and thus I can't speak Spanish. So our minds are super, super, super powerful in this process. And again, there's no quick fix on it. I'm going to talk about some things that can help, but this is incredibly important to understand that you really do have power over your relationship with stress and over your relationship with burnout. And it might not happen immediately, but if you believe that you have the power to get yourself out of it and move beyond it, then you can move beyond it. So with that said, setting time, space, and productivity boundaries actually preserves your headspace and serves as a model for others. And I can't stress that enough, the importance of that, especially for those of us with children at home. We are modeling our relationship with stress. We are modeling how we're managing ourselves. We are modeling. Right now we're on show, and it's okay. Like it's good to show kids that we're not perfect. It's good to show people around us that we have the emotional range. This is all very positive stuff, but it's also good to model, hey, that mindset of, hey, I can move past this. I can do things and implement things and put boundaries in my life that are going to help me move in a positive direction. So how do you do this? Number one, when it comes to mindset and boundary management, it's so important for us to change the voice in our heads. A lot of times when we're feeling overwhelmed and we're feeling stressed, that voice is a pretty critical, nasty voice and a very powerful voice that instead of I think I can, it feels like I just can't anymore. That I think I can is a very, very, very important thing and statement to say in your head. And We have to kind of think about it as marathoners. And what I mean by that is when you think about marathoners, they are actually changing their relationship with time. What they're doing is like, okay, I'm going to get to this mile. They're not thinking about the whole big picture. They're thinking about, I'm getting to this mile, and then I'm going to get to the next mile, and then I'm going to get to the next half mile, and then I'm going to get to the next quarter mile, whatever it might be. These small little goals, it's about changing our relationship with time. It might not all happen at once, but these little, small, tiny steps actually do make a huge difference. And when we tell our brains, this is how I'm evolving, like I'm in this moment, I am making these small progressive steps, makes a huge, huge difference versus thinking about the whole big picture. Because when you go there, that just tells the brain, hey, let's get overwhelmed. Rather, small little steps. The other thing that's so super important right now is, you know what? Think about good enough. It doesn't have to be excellent. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be unbelievable. Good enough is really great right now. And that is a really important thing to model to people around us, whether they're our partners, friends, spouses, kids. That's a really important message. Like, good enough is okay. Really important is reestablishing and redefining our expectations for ourselves and the people around us. And I think this is for those of us that are part of organizations or part of teams. These conversations are critical. We as humans need expectations. We thrive on knowing what's expected of us. When we don't know what is expected of us, it feels bad. But what was expected of us before is probably can't be the same now, or what we expected of ourselves probably can't be the same now. So this is a fantastic exercise to have a heart-to-heart with yourself and the people on your team and the people in your family, and have a discussion of an expectation conversation. Like, this is what I can do. This is what I expect of you. This is what I can do. This is what I expect of myself. And this is what I don't expect. And revisiting that, because as we go further and further along, we need to be flexible with shifting expectations of our families, of ourselves, and of the teams that we work with. But these conversations are critical. As I keep on saying, as much as you can routinize, as much as you can keep consistent. And even, for those of us that lost the commute to work, commute. Don't lose that time. Don't do more work during the time that you would have taken to commute. Like, if you commuted for an hour in the morning and then the afternoon or half an hour, use that time to go commute. And your commute might look different. That might be reading a newspaper. Actually, maybe not reading a newspaper. That might be walking a mile. That might be going for a bike ride. That might be having a leisurely coffee and reading a magazine. Whatever it is. That might be hanging out with your kids. Whatever it is, don't lose those routines that you had. And then obviously, like I was saying before, routinize as many behaviors as possible. That's brain 101. Just do that for your brain as quickly as possible. Another very important thing, and my background as a psychologist, I hate saying this out loud, but limit your processing time. I think that, like I said before, it's very easy to focus on the negative and focus on the bad, and it's harder for us to retrieve all the good stuff. When we are constantly talking about ick things or things that are stressing us out, we're constantly reading the news or whatever it might be, that automatically puts you a little bit into a tailspin. It increases stress, your mind stress, your body stress, all of that. And that can enhance burnout. So limit your processing time. Yes, it's important to talk about it, but don't stay stuck in it. And a way to not stay stuck in it is use feel-good cues. So use things that make you happy, whether that be watching a comedy strip or not a comedy strip, like a comic strip, watching a comedy video, watching puppies or kittens or kids, whatever it is that like makes you laugh or brightens you up. Those feel good cues during the day when you start going down are super important to kind of snap you out of it. Another really important thing is what I call yes-no prioritization. With that overwhelming to-do list and that feeling of overwhelm, it's so important to try to, like I said, get things out of your head. If you can talk to someone or write it all down and then put it in these terms, 2 questions to ask yourself. Is this task in service to my personal goals? Is this task in service to my professional goals? If the answer is no, put it on a list for later. The other question, is this task going to make or break me today? So really kind of organizing what are my immediates, my urgents versus my like to do's. Very important to separate. Another very important trick to help your brain not feel so tired by the end of the day with this kind of Zoom fatigue is no multitasking on Zoom, which is also extremely hard. It's extremely hard and I'm sure most of us are experiencing this right now. You're listening to me talk and babble on, and I'm sure there's other tabs open, and it's really hard to just focus on one thing. I get it. But what you're doing is you're like triple taxing your brain. Because first, we're not supposed to be on screens all the time, constantly. Second, we're not good at multitasking, and we're not supposed to be multitasking. And third, you're not really hearing the information. So instead of multitasking on the screen, what I suggest is get a pad of paper, pencil, a pen, and just doodle. You doodle with your right hand, it actually starts making you focus on what's going on and kind of distracts that need for distraction. Be innovative about socialization. We need to socialize. That feeling of feeling more socially isolated, it's real and it's rampant. So we need to make time to figure out ways to socialize, virtually, social distance, whatever it is, we need that connection. Also talk it out. And like I said, keep your commute. So these things that I'm recommending, if you remember in the beginning of this presentation, I talked about all the different things that are impacting our brain. But all the different recommendations are actually scientifically designed to tackle all the things that are taxing our brains and making us feel very burnt out. So the routinization helps with exhaustion, setting the expectations, like our expectations that we have for ourselves. What that does is it tackles the feeling of ambiguity. Keeping consistency tackles the feeling that we feel when we're overwhelmed with change. Focusing on our mindset tackles the feeling of loss of control, that we do have control over our mindset and how we react to things. And finally, these feel-good cues tackle the feeling, don't tackle it, don't take it away, but they help counter some of the feeling of grief. So if these things have been taken away, if these are the things that are challenged in our lives right now, which are causing stress and burnout and other emotional symptoms, we can create different opportunities. So on that note, I want to open up the floor for any questions or comments.
Great. And I'd love to put the QR code back on the screen as we're getting into the Q&A. Nicole, that was really helpful. I love all the tips. The
Thanks.
Zoom doodling, I'm going to do that one, right? That one is actually started, as you said that. Really good stuff. But just as a reminder for everybody, submit your questions. All you need to do is scan the QR code on the screen. It'll pop up a little link for you to input your question. If you don't do QR codes, the link in the Eventbrite invitation has it as well. So our first question that has come through here, Nicole, it says, we've been trying to raise our kids with limited screen time, but now that they're required to be online for school for several hours at a time each day, post-COVID, how are we going to, as a society, undo all the inevitable negative consequences for these kids?
Oh, this part makes me so sad, and that's a huge, huge question. I think I'm going to answer it in two parts. First of all, for your kids, I think one of the important things, because yes, if you've been trying to reduce screen time and now they have to be on screens, I really, even if the school or the teachers are giving breaks, maybe even encourage more breaks, because for young kids' minds, it's so important that we help them get away and not get into the habits that we've fallen into early on, because again, habits early on are really important to form. I think post-COVID, I don't know the answer to this, but I think that we are going to have to think about things that are even more engaging than our technology, which is very hard because as most of us know, that there are actually things that have been built into our technology to make us addicted, as we know. But we're going to have to be creative. We're going to have to be creative, and I think also work with the mindset of children. And give them some agency over what they might want beyond technology. Like give them possibilities and show the possibilities beyond technology. But this is going to be a tough one.
Yes, it definitely is. But those are some good things to keep in mind. Thank you. here's a really good one. How do you prevent yourself from overworking when your to-do list is never ending? Any tips there?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is, and again, I don't know who's asking this. I don't know if you are an emergency room doctor, but if you're not an emergency room doctor, I think one of the things that we can all do is put into perspective, like if I don't, like really asking the question, if I don't accomplish this right now, what are the consequences of it? So I think for you, the person that asked this question, I think that yes, no prioritization task is super, super important. And I just want to repeat it. And I also think don't do it alone. Talk to someone else that's close with you in your life that can help you be a little bit more objective about your to-do list. So the yes, no prioritization, you're asking yourself, is this task in service to my professional goals? Is this task in service or professional responsibilities? Is this task in service to my personal responsibilities? And possibly for you, if everything feels like a yes, then possibly for you is putting a timeline next to it. Because the reality is that you can't do it all. You can't do it all at once. You might be able to accomplish things over time, and that's reestablishing your relationship with time, but you can't do it all at once. And if you start letting it bleed into your off time, what's going to happen is your brain capacity isn't going to be at full capacity. So you're going to be actually ending up working harder. This is that ugly, ugly cycle that we fall into when we feel so busy, and then we end up being busier and busier because we're not as productive. So you need to think about managing your mental space and your head space and your well in order to be more productive. So prioritize, yes, no, talk to someone who's objective about who can be objective. I do it with I have my husband do it when I'm because I fall into that trap all the time. So I will go through my list, and it is amazing when I start talking it out loud, what's actually urgent versus just important for later.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And, you know, even just that there's not always an upside of doing more and more work if your to-do list is never ending. So at some point, it's not serving you, right?
Right. Another thing is like and that's actually an interesting one, because the other thing is most of us have ongoing to-do lists that never end, like that weight. And so that might be also a matter of changing your mindset around it, kind of accepting the fact that because you're just going to always have a non-ending, like, I don't know if to-do lists ever end, but then the urgent emergency things versus the important things that you would like to do. It's how you organize your to-do list.
Great. Very helpful. Yep, as a reminder, I will flash the QR code up there one more time for folks that haven't had a chance to put a question in. Please do, or you can follow the link in the Eventbrite invitation. Here's another one. So you talked about, you know, people bringing you down in your emotional, the emotional contagion, I think. So if people are bringing you down, what can you do? What if you're quarantined with them?
Okay. So a couple of things. I think this is interesting because I think what quarantine has shown us is who we like to be around and who we don't, and if we can tolerate it or not. Obviously, step one is talking to that person. A lot of times when people are on the contagious side, you know, when they're on the negative side, a lot of times they don't even realize they are, and they don't realize the impact they're having on other people. So I think if you're comfortable, talk to that person and let them know. It's a hard conversation, but often when people recognize the impact that they're having on other people, especially emotionally, they want to change. Now, if that person doesn't want to, if they don't see it or they're defensive about it, you have to set the boundaries. You have to set the boundaries, and whether that be your own kind of space in your place, whether that be getting outside if you're able to, and making sure that you're kind of like, again, setting yourself up for success with this, because it is a real thing. But start with talking. If it doesn't work, start setting the boundaries and make sure that you're in your space or getting out in a socially distanced way.
Great. Okay. Next we have, so you touched on this a little bit about isolation. So, you know, if you're still feeling isolated working from home, what can you do?
Yeah, I think that's super hard. I think we have to be extremely mindful of that. And one of the caveats I want to add with everything I said, if the stress and overwhelm or the symptoms feel like they're escalating, talk to someone. Like, don't be afraid to talk to a therapist. Don't be afraid to talk to, if you're a leader in a company and you're dealing not only with your own stuff, but everyone else, don't be afraid to get executive coaching. Like this is the time to do it. So that's number one. But with regard to social isolation, like that can lead to a lot of stuff, because we're not meant to be so isolated. So I think it's very important to figure out ways to connect to other people, even if that means doing Zoom calls or Zoom happy hours or whatever it might be, even though you don't want to be online anymore, even a phone call. And one of the things I do suggest, if you're feeling socially isolated and you do want to do Zoom calls and you want to see your friends' faces, do calls on the phone as much as you can. It doesn't always have to be this. I would also suggest there's a lot of communities to get involved with. There's a lot of group things happening in virtual. Like we've adapted to the virtual thing. So there's a lot of opportunities. Maybe it's about picking up a hobby that you like doing and finding a group that's doing it. There's all these different things, but know that there's a lot of people in that boat, but it's up to us to figure out how to engage versus letting ourselves remain in that kind of feeling of social isolation. I hope that helped answer it.
Yeah, I think so. And it's just a helpful reminder too that, there's talking to somebody professionally, even this might, that's always something to consider. It's good. Okay. I'm going to ask to flash up the QR code one more time as we're kind of wrapping up. If there's any other final questions, please get them in now. And then as we're doing that, I'll ask the next one. So someone asked, is there an upside to all of this? Do you see any skills that we can carry over to when life gets back to normal?
Oh yeah, there's a huge upside to this. As hard as this feels, what this is teaching us, like there's an upside for adults and there's an upside for kids. The upside for adults is this is teaching, like, look, we're doing it. Like we're doing it. We are living through this crazy pandemic and we are living through 2020. And like, honestly, I don't know what else is in store for 2020. I'm sure there's more, but like it has been and I saw this funny meme, like I'm afraid of the season finale of 2020. It was hysterical, but like every month we've been hit with something else. Like we are a resilient race. We are, and even though there feels like there might be a lot of hate and anger and all of that, like we are hearing it. Like things are bubbling up now, and it's like a mirror showing us the things that we do need to deal with in our society. So what's coming from this is empathy, resilience, the ability, the grit to persevere through all of this. So as hard as this all feels, the ability, what also is evolving is the ability to play with our mindset and know that, because like underneath resilience, all of that is mindset. Like the ability to know that we can push ourselves and care for ourselves. Our priorities and values are shifting. We're learning about ourselves. There's so much that's coming out of this. And I can't imagine any one person being the same. I can't imagine anyone not evolving as we go through this. And for those of us that have kids, as hard as this is, the amazing thing about this is our kids are experiencing life school right now. They are experiencing how to work through disappointment. They are experiencing how to work through stress. They're experiencing how to work through ambiguity and change at this young age. They're getting life school, and they're getting these skills that are going to help them personally and professionally. These are the social emotional skills that are and learning how to deal with their emotions. These big, freaky emotions. They're learning how to deal with them and to feel them and experience them, and that it's okay. So what an amazing, even though we wish that we weren't going through this, for both adults and children, what an amazing gift we're getting to be able to reframe it this way and to look at it that way. And if you can reframe it that way, it really does help put perspective around stuff. It helps it be less burnouty and more like, okay, I can do it. More of that marathon-y thing mindset.
Awesome. I love that. What a way to look at it. That's great. One question came in. Could you put Nicole's contact info on the screen again? So I don't know if we can pull that up. There's one more question that came in. Yep. So great. Thank you for that. So as I'm asking this, we'll leave that up. So what tips, Nicole, what tips are there for those working from their bedroom? Since it's been stated it's not good to work where you rest.
Yeah, so not the best situation, obviously. However, if that's your situation, I absolutely recommend, even though it might be hard not to work from bed, even if you only have like 5 inches in your room, whatever it is, make a space that's not in your bed, that's your own space. And if possible, buy one of those little dividers, like those little wall dividers. So you can, so when you are in bed, you're not staring at your computer and your work. So divide it and make your space and get up and leave your bedroom, go into your kitchen, go somewhere else, and then go back to work. Like make sure you are doing that like kind of commute too. But divide it.
Great tip.
And get out of your pajamas.
That's tougher.
Even though I never want to. That's a tough one. That's a really hard one.
Awesome. Well, this is great. The last couple questions, a few folks have asked if the slides will be available as a reference, and will the event be recorded and shared? I know on our end, we always like to share out the recording, so we'll definitely be doing that. Nicole, we can also talk about sharing the slides if that's a possibility as well. Great. And then, yeah, so I think we're right about a time. So I think we'll wrap it up. So just on behalf of everyone, Nicole, thank you so much for your time today. The great information, super helpful for all of us. I know this. Thank you to everyone who joined us for all the questions and your time. So stay tuned for the recording of the session. I'd encourage everyone to visit staplesconnect.com/working for even more resources and offers to help you work from home more effectively. And we appreciate your time, Nicole. Again, thank you. And we'll wrap that up on that note. All right. Take care, everyone.
Bye all.
Bye.
Thank you.